I remember one road trip, my parents piled us in a car and we drove clear across to Utah from New Jersey.
Oh, wow.
and these weren't SUVs with third rows. These were sedans.
And no social media or no...
There were my two brothers and I were in the back seat in a single row. So you can imagine the sort of the dynamic in that car driving what must have been 6,000 miles.
On this episode of Take This Down, I sit down with Rich Andreski, President and Chief Executive Officer of Trinity Metro. We talk about growing up in a small town in New Jersey, how he wanted to be an astronaut growing up, but ultimately led him to a career in public transportation. You're going to want to take this down. You're going to want to take this down. So Rich, first I want to thank you for joining me on Take This Down. It's a privilege and an honor to be able to have you on the show today.
Ty, it's so great to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, I like to always tell my guests why I invited them. I'm sure you may have heard, before I started the show, I sat down and I kind of identified a lot of different individuals that I'd be curious to have a conversation with. And I'll be honest, it wasn't until we met at Leadership Prime and I had the opportunity to, have a few conversations with you, learn a little bit about you. I paid a little bit more attention to Trinity Metro, and I'll never forget the announcement when you were announced as the CEO. I was like, oh, we got someone from the Northeast. I consider myself a honorary Northeast guy. So to be able to finally have this conversation with you in a more extended version, I'm truly looking forward to it. So to kind of just jump right into it, who is Rich Andreski at his core?
I'm one of three in a family of five. My parents were teachers. We grew up in New Jersey. Grew up in the same house my whole life. My parents were very matter-of-fact people, very humble people. We had dinner together every night. We did homework together at the dinner table. My parents were always about just putting your head down, do the right thing, treat others with respect. I didn't really appreciate sort of what I had in kind of growing up. I guess every child, when you're growing up, you don't really know other experiences. You only know your own. It was a very sort of stable home. We did a family vacation every year together in a road trip. We'd all pile in the car.
Growing up with educators as parents, I'd imagine education was taken very seriously in your household.
Very much so. My parents were so proud to be teachers. They worked really hard at it. It was always, it just sort of drilled into us, do your best. Is this your best effort? That was sort of always the question. And they really, you could see how much they cared about their job. It was not just a job, it was a calling for them. And my father was a math teacher in high school, and my mom was an elementary teacher. And there was even one moment in my life where I remember my mom was transitioning back into the workforce and she was a substitute teacher, and I had her as a substitute in one of my classes.
How did that go?
Yeah, that was a little awkward.
So did you get to call her mom, or did you have to call her?
I think I might have slipped up, and I was hugely embarrassed because as you are when you're young.
Right. Yeah. So, with your parents as educators and having a strong educational foundation, did you feel like you was ready to take on the world when you left for college?
No. My world was really my family and my town. I didn't really know much about the bigger world out there. So I had no idea about I had some inkling. I step back. One thing growing up I had an opportunity to do was go to space camp.
Oh.
And I was so interested in being an astronaut. So for most of my junior, middle school and high school time period, I was sort of working towards that track. So taking a lot of science and math classes, and then even looking at colleges that would set me up for a career with NASA.
Because I'm glad you mentioned that, because I saw that you were biology, major in undergrad. And so I was assuming that you were, going to pre-med track, but being an astronaut, what sparked that interest?
I just remember growing up and they would interrupt. Remember, everything was live, right, years ago, and they'd interrupt TV and carry the space shuttle launch. And it's just that really stuck with me. I vaguely remember the Challenger incident. I just remember being very, very tuned into it. So I would read as much as I could. I'd go to the library and get as many books as I could on the topic. I would subscribe. I remember subscribing to a magazine. And it was just something that, for whatever reason, it was very exciting to me.
Gotcha. So you ultimately, maybe unfortunately or fortunately, didn't become an astronaut. When did you know that transportation or public transportation was an interest of yours?
There was an evolution in my career, in my life, where I felt this gravitation to public service, doing something. I had lots of jobs. My first job, I was 15 years old, and I held lots of different jobs in my community. And then I had a position in New York City, working for then the Chase Manhattan Bank, and I was commuting every day on the train. And I remember thinking, geez, I would love, this is just curious. I mean, these trains are zipping in and out of the city, thousands of people, and I just got really curious about it and got involved. I reached out to my local mayor, wanted to help, got put on a committee to begin to lobby for improvements to rail transportation.
And so when you started, I would say taking interest and making recommendations, what did you see what was wrong with public transportation at that particular time?
Well, for decades, this is fairly well understood now, but for decades there was this period of disinvestment in public transit. So there was a lot of excitement around the highways and the automobile and suburbanization of America. And so up until the late 70s, it was really a steady decline in investment. And in the 80s and moving into the 90s, there was this reawakening that public transportation matters. It matters in a huge way in terms of connecting people to opportunity, but also the economics of it make a lot of sense. So I got in at the right time. My career sort of started when we were on the upswing in the industry, and it's been heartening to see the pivot that every city around America has been making on this. It's not just the Northeast anymore.
Right. And so, you ultimately land a job where you are over the Department of Transportation, or if I'm saying that correctly, for the state of Connecticut. Was that a position that you were ready for?
Yeah. Well, I guess we all have these career moments where we transition from a sort of a team member to maybe a leader or a senior leader. So my role there in Connecticut was Bureau Chief of Public Transportation for the state. So the scope was all of the buses and trains and ferries in and around the state. And to answer your question, leading an organization to me is a huge responsibility. And so, if anything, I was candidly, I was nervous about, am I up to this? Am I ready to take this role on? What I've come to realize is that you're surrounded when you're in a leadership position, you're hopefully surrounded by people smarter than you. And I've learned to embrace that. So I embrace that in Connecticut, and that's one of my values here. You want people smarter than you in the room with you, and you're not making decisions alone, you're making them together.
No, I like that. I like that a lot. One thing that I've heard other leaders speak about, and something that maybe I didn't know at the time what it was called, but what I felt myself was a little bit of imposter syndrome. You know that you're qualified, but you're wondering, do I deserve this, position? Am I ready for this? What are people going to think about me in this role? Did you ever have any type of thoughts or feelings like that?
Yeah, there's moments of vulnerability. Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's you're being entrusted, right, in a leadership role to succeed. You're to advance the organization, to deliver on commitments. Yes, absolutely. There's a nervousness about it. What I would say is I've been very fortunate to have mentors in my life who were looking out for me, were there when I needed to make a phone call and check in on something. Am I thinking about this the right way? What would you do in this situation? And I think that, to me, that's been transformational for me, because I never imagined being in a role that I'm in today.
Gotcha. So I know you accomplished a lot of great things while you were in Connecticut. Is there anything particular that stands out that you're like, okay, I'm very proud of the work we did in XYZ, or proud that we were able to do this initiative?
One comes to mind. It's if you looked at my LinkedIn profile, you'll see I really value partnerships and relationships. And so in Connecticut, we were launching a brand new rail system, a service, and we're doing that in coordination with Amtrak. And what was unique about what we were doing is we were creating this new service that was really a blend of two companies. An Amtrak provided service and a state of Connecticut provided service. And we had to break through so many institutional hurdles to do that. So we had one set of schedules. The trains were coordinated so that they ran sequentially, and it created this one service plan. We had one set of fares. So you didn't have an Amtrak fare and a state of Connecticut fare. There was one fare. The onboard experience, the policies, everything had to be sort of coordinated hand in glove. And I'm really proud of that because it took breaking the mold to do that. We had to convince lots of people, lots of levels of the organizations to think differently about that. And it was a huge success. And that's really gratifying to me when we see what's most gratifying is when we work hard together and we have a vision and we make that vision a reality. That's really that's all the reward that I want.
And so you're having this great career. You're obtaining a lot of success and accomplishments on the Northeast. That Fort Worth, Texas Trinity Metro calls. What makes you answer the call, but also ultimately become the president and chief executive officer for Trinity Metro?
I very much like to put roots down in a community. And we, my family, I have 3 children. My wife, we were very, very happy in Connecticut. We were sort of settled into the routine of community life and school. And so I wasn't looking. And I almost said thanks, but no thanks. And my wife said, why don't you have a conversation? And those conversations very quickly led to me really seriously considering this move. And the reason was I could quickly see that people here, both in Fort Worth and the board of directors that I was meeting with, were very open to change, thinking differently. And that was exciting to me. I'm in the Northeast, and I love where I worked in Connecticut, but we had a historic rail system there, a historic transit system. There's not a lot of growth going on in Connecticut. It's mostly infill development, tweaks. Here, we're growing leaps and bounds every year. And so there's a desire to think boldly.
Not to minimize, obviously, any of your predecessors or the work that was done prior to you at Trinity Metro, did you get the feeling that it was like a piece of clay that you can mold to your own versus just adding enhancements to where it might have been in your previous stops?
That's a great analogy. Yeah, I think so. What we see here, right, is this very dynamic situation where we have development happening all across the city. We have transportation networks being built from scratch, not so much anymore, but major interchange reconstructions. We're mapping out new parts of the city that have yet to be built. And so, I think it is like clay in the sense that we're shaping this future of the city that is to come. And what we choose to do now and how we envision that city of the future will be reality for people. And do we want to, and I've always said, we've got a lot of things going for ourselves, but congestion is coming. It's here in some respects, and we want to make sure we're ahead of that as much as we can be.
Yeah. I want to talk about that, but first I want to go back and, I read an article that you did or interview that you did with the Fort Worth Report, I think last year, and you talked about building the trust back of the community. And as I was reading that, I was thinking, do people not trust public transportation? And so I'm curious, to understand, what did you mean, or can you elaborate a little bit more about how you and Trinity Metro are going about building the trust with the community?
These are great questions. Well, let me start by saying I am, in my role, the beneficiary of a lot of smart people that went before me. And so it's not a criticism of Trinity Metro and what Trinity Metro has done in the past. But I do think we have some work to do to have our ear closer to the ground and to really understand where people, first of all, how are we doing currently? What do people want to see more of from us? Building some of the relationships with the city are really important. Everything we do, Trinity Metro, has to be hand in glove there with the city. So we've done a lot to reach out to city leaders, both elected as well as staff, to regain their support and trust. And trust is really about communication. Right. So I think what we're doing right now, and you may have seen some of this already, is we are going out to the community where people live, into neighborhoods, into churches, schools, libraries, and meeting people after hours to really listen, because our transit system really is not at a level commensurate with where we want to be as a city. So we have work to do to improve the network, to connect more neighborhoods and communities, to make ourselves more relevant.
Going back to, controlling traffic or helping with traffic, Panther Island's coming soon. And, I think I saw we're expecting another 10,000 potential people coming into downtown every day. How can we as a community, but also you at Trinity Metro, help reshape or help people think about how to access downtown from a public transportation standpoint than the single occupant vehicle?
It's fantastic when you look at examples from around the country, and you can pick your examples. They don't. What I've tried to do is look at communities around the country that are similar to us, culturally, politically, socially, and what we see is that when we make investments in projects like streetcar, what we see is a more powerful return on the private sector investment. So the question isn't whether Panther Island will get redeveloped. That's going to happen. The question is, what kind of character and quality of life will that neighborhood be? What will that connection look like between downtown and Panther Island and the stockyards? And we think transit could play a big role in that. If you think about the distances involved, we're talking about 3 or 4 or 5 miles between these points. And those are the kinds of distances where transit is really effective. There's no reason to be jumping in a car to go from Panther Island to grab dinner in downtown. If you think about those 10,000 trips, can you imagine if everyone was in a single occupant vehicle? Right. It's not good for anyone. So I think there's a real opportunity here for Trinity Metro to play a leadership role. And I'm very excited. Mayor has announced a committee of business leaders and public sector leaders to come together and look at that. What are the merits? What are the costs? What are the benefits?
That's good. Now, this is a selfish question. So I lived in Houston during the period of time where they were adding the streetcar rails throughout various points of the city. It was a pain for construction, but the final product, I loved it. Mm-hmm. Do you think it's a possibility that one day we could see that same type of street rail system in Fort Worth?
Well, I think the answer is yes, and I think we must find a way to do these projects. Now, I'm not suggesting I'm not getting ahead of where our leaders might be at the moment on this subject. But as we grow and we think about adding hundreds of thousands of people to Fort Worth and millions of people to our region, we're going to have another tool in our toolbox to solve transportation issues. If we keep going to the highway option, we are in some ways eroding that future prosperity. Going back to my Northeast example, there were places in Connecticut that were so congested that you just knew, I don't go there this time of the day, or I don't go there this time of the week, because the trip would be double the length due to congestion. And so what is that? That's a tax on the economy, right? When you're sitting in traffic and you're not productive, you're frustrated, it's not good for public health, it's not equitable. You have to have a car to get anywhere. These are really big questions for us. And so I think the answer is we're going to have to find a way to invest in public transportation and rail. And rail plays a big role in that. I'll tell you that the Tex Rail story is so important to Fort Worth. We, for many, many decades, talked about Tex Rail. And 5 years ago, we opened that service. It has been a huge success. Something like 35% of all Fort Worth residents have used that service at one point. And so it is, one of the things I heard in the Northeast was you're going to Texas, people don't take transit in Texas. And that's not what we're finding. We're finding people are willing to try it and they like it when they do.
Anytime I go to the city to the east of us, I always try to take the Tex Rail because one, I feel like it's faster, it's efficient, and I don't have to, find parking and things of that nature. Or recently when I was flying out of DFW, I took the rail because it's efficient and it's easy, and I feel like I can multitask. So, I think I may be in the minority in the sense of that, I think public transportation and what we currently have gives us a lot of great options and flexibility, but also am hopeful for more options available to us. I know you're working on a lot of projects right now currently, but what's a particular project or something in the horizon that you're excited about or proud of?
I love that question. What we've done is we started with market research. And over the last year, we have done an enormous amount of work. We've done polling both in Fort Worth and Tarrant County. We've also done focus groups. One of the things that jumped off the page at us was brand awareness and recognition of Trinity Metro and what we do. Only 22% of respondents had unaided brand awareness. In layman's terms, what that means is if you ask them who provides public transportation here in the region or on our side of the region, they couldn't answer the question. Part of that is we've got all these services. They don't necessarily relate to one another publicly. We've branded them separately. So we have TexRail, we have ZipZone. Folks think these are actually individual companies, not part of Trinity Metro. So one of the things we're doing this year is a brand simplification effort to really bring together our network as one system that people can easily understand. We're simplifying fares. We've got 3 or 4 or 5 different fares for different services. We're going to have one fare now for all services. So if you purchase a fare from Trinity Metro, it's your option whether you want to use that on rail, on bus, on ZipZone. And so I'm excited about that. We're also going to simplify routes and improve frequencies. One of the things holding us back right now is the network that we have is a safety net system. It's essentially there as if you absolutely have no other option, transit's there to take you. We want to make transit a really viable option for anyone. And what that means is starting with frequency. Most of our routes need to evolve to 15-minute frequencies at worst, right? And then growing into even more frequent services. When you know the service is there, you don't need to schedule. The fares are simple. The onboard experience is pleasant. We find, and we're finding this already in some of our numbers, people respond. We've added 1 million rides a year in 3 years in a row. And in this year, current year, we're on track to add another 1 million riders.
Now, I know it's something that impacted every industry, but how has Trinity Metro responded since COVID?
COVID was sort of a reset in the public transportation space. Everyone was sort of rethinking the business model. What I would say here in Fort Worth is we were less affected on the transit system because we were not as heavily dependent on downtown employment. So a lot of our transit rides come from discretionary travel, either festivals, entertainment, leisure travel. We are partners with DART in the Trinity Railway Express. A lot of folks use that to go to the American Airlines Center. So we were not affected as much, although during the heart of the pandemic we were affected, we quickly rebounded. And what we're seeing is growth on the bus network too. So we are well ahead now of our pre-pandemic ridership levels.
This is a question that just came to me right now. How would you define, how do you define, wins, or what's KPIs for building the brand awareness or growing the Trinity Metro capacity, if you will?
Yeah, so we have operational KPIs that we manage to every day. When we think about success and what does that look like in the future, it is, first of all, we think it's about broader support in our community for what we do. And how do we do that? We do that through building trust and being accountable and delivering on our commitments. So we have a pipeline that we're building for the next 3 to 5 years right now, which includes a whole sort of set of new goals and services. And delivering on those and making sure they're successful is really important. I think as we look to the future, we get to a great transit system by delivering on these incremental improvements and sustain that success. At some point, when we think about success long-term, it's going to require a whole new scorecard in terms of how do we get there, right? So near-term KPIs are ridership, reliability, frequency, customer satisfaction. Long-term, it's really going to be about connecting neighborhoods that aren't connected today, making sure we're part of the development discussion. A lot of times we think about our road network and how the road network has to evolve to support development. We need to build the transit into that conversation as well, right? So when we're thinking about Walsh Ranch to the west, as an example, we're having early conversations about, okay, what is the transit component going to look like in that development?
And so what can either myself as an individual or other individuals, as well as community partners, do to help you and Trinity Metro meet your goals?
Ty, you've been a friend since I met you here a little less than 2 years ago. What I find about Fort Worth is that we're all connected. I know folks are fond of saying we're the largest, is it the largest small city in America? Yeah. And where I'm always impressed when we come together for events and we network and we support each other through associations and committees. It's the quiet conversations that happen behind the scenes, the support that we give each other when we need support on a given topic. Speak up, be vocal about the work that we're doing, come out and support us where there's opportunities. There's going to be lots of opportunities like the one, for example, that the mayor is kicking off around this urban rail committee, and just being a supporter. That means a lot. We are, one of the things that I'm really careful about doing is not talking about Trinity Metro by itself, right? It's not about rail and bus service. It's about what those services can do for the larger goals of the community, both at an individual level, right? If you want to take an employment opportunity, go back to school, you shouldn't have to own a car to do that. But then at a business level, there are goals that companies have in terms of talent attraction and retaining talent. There's goals that developers have in terms of land use. We can be supportive of those goals. 30, 40 years from now, we're at Rich Andreski's retirement party. And it's your opportunity and your turn to get the mic and to have a few words. How do you want to be remembered? Well, I'm not sure it's 30 to 40 years away. That's wishful thinking. Although I really want to see success for Trinity Metro. I don't necessarily want to be remembered directly. I've sort of always been comfortable with the fact that I'm in a relay race and I took the baton from someone and I'm passing that baton to someone else. And so I want to leave the place better than I found it. I would love for me to walk out that door someday and have the Trinity Metro organization not miss a beat. That would be a point of pride for me. That sort of carried the organization forward, put great people in leadership roles, and in my retirement party, it would be surrounded by friends and just celebrating success, not me, but the success of Trinity Metro.
But Rich, I want to thank you again for taking the time. I know you're a busy man, but I really do appreciate you taking the time to sit down and have this conversation. It was truly impactful and everything I thought it would be. So thank you again.
Ty, thank you.
So
appreciate you.
Absolutely.